There, now we can get started. Is there anyone else who wants me to? I'm going to put it out in front. I know what to do with it. All right. And here's our presenters ready to go again.
There we go.
Answer all your wonderful questions.
We have a rowdy crew today. I love it. Welcome, everyone. Deb Van Duinen, this is the second part of our series on this. And Linda and I actually are coming back for a third part this fall, where we're specifically going to talk about young adult novels. So as we've talked about, they're sort of the hotbed of books that are being challenged and banned today because of their more intense content. So they're for ages 13 to 18. Okay. Middle grade books also fall within this, and picture books, which is why we're sort of focusing in on banned books in this session. But I wanted to give you an idea for those of you who have teenage grandkids and or who are interested in just hearing how, since Catcher in the Rye, how has young adult literature changed over the years? So we'll give you an in-depth session about that and have books for you to peruse and look at and so on. Today, we're going to go back and we're going to focus on books for children ages 6 to 12. We're looking at banned books and challenged books, as well as sensitive subjects. And I wanted to, I'm hitting the wrong one here. We're going to start by just some reminders of what we talked about last week, just so we're all on the same page. For those of you who weren't able to be here last week, and to those of you online, welcome. So great to have you join us as well. For those of you online, if you would like to submit a question or a comment, please do so in the chat, and we're going to make sure that we're responsive to that. We'll start with reminders. I want to share 3 myths with you about responding to banned books. Linda and I loved looking through your questions and comments from last week, and we designed today to be responsive specifically to those, as well as to have more interaction. Last week was a lot of information sharing with you. This week, we would love to hear more about your thoughts, your questions, your wonderings, your experiences, and you represent a wide variety of contexts, schools, libraries, involved parents back in the day, involved grandparents today. And so we'd love to hear from you. So the purpose today, more interactive, some reminders, some more specifics. We'll be looking at some specific books and passages that have been questioned and brought up. And then we're gonna, once again, Linda and I will respond from our different vantage points, me as a teacher educator and as director of our Big Read program, and Linda as an author. So that's where we're headed for today. There we go. Just as a reminder, some terms to be familiar with to guide our conversation. And one of the reasons Linda and I are passionate about this topic is we feel there is not good discourse around this. It's polarizing. And anyone who bans books is seen as a crazy nut job. And anyone who doesn't is seen as, you know, the bastion of democracy. And I just think it's much more complicated than that. And I want us to have deeper, more thoughtful and intentional conversations around this topic. So how do we do that? It's by using specific terms. It's by sort of pulling back what are the layers that are informing decisions and informing this increase in book banning and this response to book banning. And so laying out something at Hope College we're very passionate about are the virtues of public discourse. How do we disagree with each other well? It's hard. We don't do it well often at Hope College, but we are trying, and we are trying to help our students do it better. And one of the things I say to my students is that in order to understand and to disagree well, we need to know what we're talking about. We have to do a little bit of the work. What is the history of something? How do we empathize with where someone else might be coming from? And so in laying this groundwork, that's what we're trying to do here. When we talk about banned books, we also have to bring up the topic of challenged books. Just because a book is challenged doesn't mean it's banned. Okay, 2 very different things. Newspaper headlines get it mixed up. They will often say banned book when in fact the book was just challenged in a district and the district decided to keep the book. Okay, so there again, right, we see sort of this inflammation of these topics and trends. And so always sort of read further to say, oh, actually, you know what, this book was never banned. Or maybe we see a headline, book banned, and it might be one small district or library, right? So does that mean the whole country is banning this book? Absolutely not, right? It might. So let's put it within its proper context, okay? So banned and challenged. I think another really important part that we fail to talk about in these sort of headlines is what context is this taking place in? Is it a public library? Is it a school library? Is it a classroom curriculum? Is it an opt-in classroom book choice, right? We have many different layers. And as a parent and as a teacher, there's different implications for that. I view that. It's one thing for all of the 26 10th graders at Holland Public to read one book. It's another thing to have them self-select a book from maybe 5 choices, and maybe have parent permission to choose what book. I mean, that's a really different context. And interestingly enough, in the field of English education, more and more we are switching to letting students have choice in books. So yes, there is sort of one book, one whole class experience, but we're seeing definitely a change as we do more research in pedagogy and in understanding students' needs. More of my field of English education is saying, give students choice where possible. And I think that then allows students to choose books that maybe they are more interested in, that they are more able to read, if that makes any sense. We could talk about that a little bit later, but just so you know, my field of English education is changing. Back in the day when you all were in high school, where it was, we are all going to read Hamlet together, that doesn't happen so much. In fact, there's also, this is a dangerous trend, but there's also a trend to get rid of the classics. And we can talk about that too, but I bemoan that. And I think you can do some fun things by taking a classic and pairing it with a more current young adult novel. So there's some exciting things to do, but there is sort of this trend to prioritize presentism, is what I like to say, versus reading some of the classics. So once again, I'm just laying this all out in case we want to go back and talk about it further. So terms we were using, context, what are we exactly talking about? Are we talking about a school district or a public library? We also talked last week about processes. And for some of you, this was new, that libraries have processes for you as a patron to fill out. You fill out a form, you meet with someone if you want to challenge a book in the circulation. Same with school districts. In fact, I have Hudsonville Public Schools form right here. It's a 5-page form. And so if you are going to question any book in their school library or in a particular curriculum, a 9th grade curriculum, for example, or within a particular teacher's class, you need to fill out this rather extensive form. And so if anyone wants to look at that, I mean, for some of you, it was, I didn't realize that sort of all libraries and schools have this. Now, let's be honest, some schools had a more developed process than others. And in many ways, you could argue Hudsonville's process was not honored. We'll get to that later in their decision after parents filed a complaint. But anyway, schools and libraries do have a formal process that you need to go through if you would like to challenge a book. So that was kind of new for some of you. We also talked about decision makers. Who are the decision makers? How is government involved? Are teachers involved? What's the school board? How does that all work? We'll talk a little bit more about that today as well, because it's complicated. Anyway, that's a little bit of where we went last week. These are the issues we brought up and that we hope to delve in a little bit further today. When we're talking about banned books, oftentimes it's around the conversation of free speech and the freedom to read. Should students choose whatever they want to read whenever they want to read? Should public libraries have any kind of book? Or do certain people in the community have a right, or do people in the community have a right to determine what kinds of books their library carries? Okay, so these are fundamental philosophical questions, right? About democracy, about sphere of influence. So when we talk about these things, how can we get to those larger conversations rather than you're narrow-minded, you're too liberal, we can't get along? Like, let's start going back to civics class and talking about sphere of influence and sphere of rights. The big argument about banned books, and typically, remember we talked about it's not a left or right issue, they just do it very differently. The right tends to ban books, the left tends to cancel culture. Okay, and that's typically done on social media before books get into the hands of libraries. Okay, and so I say that because I don't think it's helpful to our public discourse to just say, oh, it's only these kinds of people who are making decisions about what kinds of books should be out there. Just the left and right do it very differently. Today, we're going to focus more on banning books. When we talk about young adult literature, I'll talk a little bit more about the publishing industry and how it's changed and the gatekeepers. And that's where typically we see more sort of left ideology come through. Okay, so just want to clarify left and right issue, failure of an ability to talk about this together. The argument for banned books is indoctrination. We'll talk a little bit more about that. There's other arguments like grooming. One of you asked about that, but the idea is that there's a certain ideology, and in the book, it is pushing that ideology, and it's going to influence children if children read it. Okay, so indoctrination, a counter argument is it's a representation. It's not an ideology. This is the way some people live. This is how what some people believe. And so a book is just representing or showing that story. Okay, so indoctrination versus representation. I think that can be a helpful way for us to think about sort of these two counter arguments about why books should be banned or why they shouldn't be banned within particular contexts. A big phrase that comes up when we're talking about banned books is it's not appropriate for an age level. Jarhead, that's the example from Hudsonville Public Schools, war memoir was not appropriate, is the argument, for teenagers to read. In addition, it was a negative view of the Army. It talked about suicide, so it was like it's a complicated book, banned, challenged argument. But the idea is, hey, kids are not, sixth graders are not at a suitable age to talk about gun violence and about police brutality. That's an argument. Okay. Question then is, who gets to decide what a sixth grader's appropriateness is, right? That gets tricky. All sixth graders are different. What happens if a sixth grader's dad experienced police brutality? Is this book not appropriate? It is his lived experience, right? So there's lots of things that come into play when we talk about age appropriate. And who gets to decide that? Is it a parent's right? Does the parent's right then supersede another parent's right in a school or in a library? And so these are all the conversations that we have. Who gets to decide which books are available for students to read, and who gets to decide what is age appropriate or not? Okay. Parents' rights, as we talked about, students' rights. Some students are saying, I want to read whatever I read, and I don't want my parents to know about what I'm reading for whatever reason. So there's sort of that angle, parents' rights, students' rights, and then teachers' expertise. Teachers saying, wait a minute, I have advanced degrees in literature or in teaching literature. Can't you trust me for what I'm going to do with a book? Right? Are we all experts? And I know we're sort of in a day and age where we are not trusting experts in any realm. It's not just teaching, government, right? Religion, etc. But what role does expertise have to play in this conversation? Restricting access versus physical removal of materials. As we talk about this, sometimes some parents are saying, hey, I just want to be I want to be involved in knowing what my kid is reading. That's different than saying, I want this book taken out of the school curriculum for any kid to have access to. And so that to me is different. And sometimes I think parents who are just saying, hey, I just want to be more informed. My kid goes to a public school. I want to know what they're reading and what they're having access to. That's different than someone saying, hey, I don't think this book should be available to anyone in a public school library or in a public library. So once again, we can think through the layers of complexity, much better conversation we can have, and we can maybe better understand each other when we do that. So wanted to highlight that. And then the last one, context of where books are used. We already talked about that. What context are we pushing against having a particular book in? Okay, here are 3 myths. And I would just love, let's just be vulnerable with each other for a moment. How many of you were like, oh, I actually believed that? Okay, let's look at the first one. Myth number 1, you should buy copies of banned books. Anyone hear that? I mean, I've actually, you've heard it. Yeah. So people have said, hey, and many of you have written in your questions, you said, what can I do? Or what's a response? I'm worried about this. A number of you said, hey, when I was a teacher or when I was a parent, this topic never came up. This is like really new to me and I want to do something. One response in the media has been, well, if you see a book being banned, buy it. Okay, it's your way to say some people like this book. That actually is a myth. Just because, and books, here's an example, Mouse, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. M-A-U-S won the Pulitzer Prize in 1996, you guys. It is an old book. It's a graphic novel and it's about World War II. There's 3 books in the series, phenomenal. If you want another good book recommendation, I'll try to limit it, you guys. I don't want to send you out with 100 book recommendations, but Mouse was banned recently. So published 1996, long time ago, won the Pulitzer. It's just been in the last several years that it has been banned. It was in an 8th grade curriculum and it was banned for a variety of reasons. We'll get into it. But when it hit the social media, it became the #1 bestseller on Amazon. And that could be people saying, wait a minute, I didn't know about this book. I want to read this book. But I think there was also some of the, well, we'll show people that this book is really popular and lots of people want to read it. That made for a great news story, but it didn't really help that particular case of banning books. Okay, so I see the large argument, but really it will keep a book in publication, but it's not enough to fight censorship. Okay, so just in the back of your mind. Second myth, you should donate banned books to local libraries or schools. Any of you were like, oh, that might have been me. I thought about that. Okay, I did, you guys. And sort of as a way to say, aha, you take these books out, well, we're just gonna bring them on back. Actually, you guys, that is not helpful either, okay? The reason not all libraries can accept donations or school, sometimes it's just not possible to accept donations, and the donated books may have already been banned, and giving copies of one banned book doesn't prevent others from being banned. So while we might like to flood a particular library with copies of the books that are being banned, it's actually not helpful for the larger cause. The last one, myth 3, if a book is banned at school, students can just go to the public library instead. And I do hear this, and there is something, I think this one's a little bit trickier in terms of complexity, but the idea is that not all communities have a Herrick library. Let's just be honest. We love on Herrick over here. Not all communities have an easily accessible library, and book bans then are also beginning to affect public libraries as well. So just because you hear about it in a school, I would encourage you to think beyond just saying, well, at least it's still available in the public library, because we're seeing more and more pushback against public libraries as well. Okay, anyway, it's just helpful, I think, sometimes when we think about what can we do about book banning, these are sort of things that maybe on the surface seem really great, but they actually are not that productive. We asked you last week, what are your questions, insights, experiences with banned and challenged books? And what I'm going to do for the next little bit is take that question and then respond to it. And as I said before, please put up your hand if you want more clarification or if you want to offer an opinion or counter argument or something. But we, once again, would really love, Linda and I would really love for you to share your thoughts here. A great question came in. What gets banned? The text or the words in a book or pictures? And the answer is both. More often than not, we see banning based on content in terms of words, okay? However, this is a great example. Anyone familiar with this book? It's called Everywhere Babies. It's a darling book, lots of cute babies, okay? This book is an example of something getting challenged and banned eventually because of its pictures. Anyone want to guess why? Yeah, that's a great thought. Actually, that is not the reason, to as far as I know, but maybe back in the day, Linda, when you were writing books, I know, since we couldn't see a pregnant woman, right? That was too much. Anyone else want to guess? You know what? That's another great guess. The answer to that is also no. Oh, sure. The comment was, the response was, where do babies come from? So we have naked babies. Where do babies come from, or how babies get here could be a reason why pictures are challenged and banned. Yeah. Diversity. Can you unpack that further? Yes, yes. And there we go. That is it. These are the two pictures that produced or that led to the challenged and bans. We see a gay couple, women and men in these two different scenes, and that was the reason. And we get sort of this idea of you're grooming or you're indoctrinating young children by showing them that this is normal. Yes.
It could be a dad and a friend. I mean, what are there labels that say these two people live together?
Thank you.
What is the?
Thank you for that. No, there is nothing.
And so it's just an insinuation.
It's an inference.
Inference.
Yes. And the illustrator has said, I wanted to represent the diversity of families that I see. And so it has left it at that, like hasn't specifically said these two, but you're absolutely right. We're making an inference, and it very much could be two brothers. It could be, right? So thank you for highlighting that. It doesn't explicitly say that. Excellent.
This is a good example up there. Illustrations are language beyond words. but they make permanent impressions that may or may not be accurate.
Mhm.
They might be brothers up there.
Yes, in the back. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'll wait. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I'm not fast. All right, who had their hand up?
Is it always clear that books that aren't selected by the library are banned? Is it sometimes thought that it just wasn't selected, or they always make it clear this is a banned book and here's why we banned it?
And tell me a little bit more about your question. When,
Well, I'm thinking that an author and an illustrator might think the library didn't select my book for its collection.
oh,
And they think, oh, I know why they didn't select it. It was banned because of this illustration.
yeah.
When in fact, that the librarian can't buy every book, and maybe they didn't buy that book.
Ooh, I thank you for that question. I'm guessing some of that happens. I think that sort of at this level, this book, for example, received awards. So when it has been vetted sort of through the sort of traditional channels, then that argument can't be used. But I think, thank you for bringing this up. I've been meaning to say this. Not all books are great books. Like not all books should be in the library, right? There's so many self-published books today, you guys, that I'm like, no, and I'm not banning it because of the content. I just think that maybe it's not at a literary level that should warrant being in a school library or a public library, right? And so sometimes we don't even talk about that. Just because there's a graphic sex scene, for example, in a young adult novel, and if someone wants to ban that, does that mean, oh, maybe it's actually a terrible book? Maybe that scene was not appropriate, right? Like, and you would hope that a publisher would help with this, but the proliferation of publishing companies today means that sometimes I think the quality, you could argue, has decreased. So I appreciate the question very much so. And haven't heard, I mean, I think some newer illustrators and authors are desperately trying to put their name out there. And I'm not sure making an argument like, oh, my book was not picked up because I did controversial topic is a strong one. You kind of have to make a name for yourself in the field, but yeah, it's interesting. I think I'll keep paying attention to that because that's a curious thing to think about.
It's going to be responsive to whether it got reviews in any of the many journals that librarians follow that are trying to sift through the haystack and find some books that they comment about. So it gets overlooked by the reviewers out of necessity. Remember that 5,000 to 7,000 new books for children come out every year.
Mhm.
And there's
It's a
no
lot.
way any library would buy more than a small fraction of those books.
Yeah.
Trying to keep up. So it has to do with the review system, which has its good side and its bad side. I mean, which is how many books are good, but they didn't get reviewed.
I think, Linda, thank you so much for that. I think that's really important. And I will say this, just to complicate it, this is what I do as a professor. There are certain publishing companies that will play it very safe. They want to make money. If there's potential that their book will not get picked up because of controversial content, they're typically not going to do it. So an example is Scholastic. Scholastic is the biggest. They can offer books for the cheapest, which means teachers can buy more of them. And you're not going to see the most sort of cutting edge topics or whatever, because they don't want to pick it up. They want to sell the most copies. Okay. Now they've changed a little bit, and interesting enough, with the increase in book bans, some Scholastic books are now being challenged and banned. But Peachtree Publishers, for example, is a small publishing company, and some of them have as their vision and mission to publish the kinds of books that aren't going to get picked up by a big publishing company because of diverse voices or et cetera. So we do have, like, some of the big ones maybe won't take some controversial subjects, but and your publisher, for example, was willing to do that. Not all of them are. So when I buy books and when I review books, I do look at my vetted publishing companies, people I've grown to trust, and to say, hey, you know what, like, you are sort of finding a niche in the market because you're willing to take on some of these authors and topics. And I'm going to trust sort of your process, even though I know Scholastic probably wouldn't have picked that up, if that makes sense. So yeah, thank you for that question. Oh, yes. Yeah.
We have one comment from our virtual watchers. The issue of parents just wanting to know what their children are reading or wanting to be able to approve their book choices is tricky. Sometimes children want to read a book on a topic that they don't feel safe with around their parents. For example, let me For example, if a child is exploring their sexuality and wants to read about this topic, the child may not feel safe asking a parent's permission to read on this topic.
And you know what? And absolutely. And when I mentioned that earlier, I should have framed it in that larger context. Indeed, for some students, it is a lifeline to read a book on their own and to say, wow, this isn't just my experience. And at home, perhaps I'm hearing this about who I am, and I've read a book that makes me feel not so alone. Yeah, so it's complicated. Absolutely. Thank you to whoever wrote that in the Zoom chat.
I'd like your comment. You talked about an explosion of books, some of the, connect that to the evolution of the internet over the last 30 years. Connections there?
I think we can mobilize more people easily. I think that you can post something on a website and that many more people, this book, for example, and Tango Makes Three is a picture book that has been challenged and banned. Nancy, I think you wrote about that before. And I think that if you have a big following on social media, you can get the word out, can get more people like, oh, I want this banned. I think absolutely there's a connection with the increase in book banning and social media, but not just that, it's the mobilizing and saying, here is what you do with your school board. You know, here, and we'll see, Florida published a list of 400 books, 16-page, super tiny print, 400 books that they're encouraging parents to pick up and make sure that their school districts don't have any of these books. I mean, I'm overwhelmed with looking at this list, you guys, and I know a lot of books, and yet, 400 of them. And it's sort of like, this is the hit list of books that should not be, at least to some people, to do this. So social media, Russ, absolutely. I think it's sort of like this this perfect storm of saying social media gives us outlets, and then there's also the really like, let's mobilize. And that, for example, though, as we'll talk about, that's people who want to ban books, and we're seeing more people who want to respond against it. There's also mobilizing in that regard.
So maybe if you were a grandparent living down in Florida, you could get on a book banning committee and read 5,000 books every year, trying to find the 4,500 that you want to put on that list.
Yes.
I use the library a lot, and very often if you go in or call and ask for a book, I think most of the libraries belong to something like a collective where if they don't have it, they can contact another library
Yes.
and it will come in. Now, if you happen to live where a library has banned books and you call that library to ask for a book, you don't know that they have banned it. If they have banned it, do they have an obligation to go through the collective and try and get that book for you?
Oh, that is an excellent question. And I'm not sure, Herrick librarians, what in the room, what would you say to that? That's an excellent question. Yeah. Oh, yes, we're waiting.
Well, today I do all of my ordering of books online. So I could go online and order any book from any library, or go to Melcat, which is the Michigan Electronic Library, and order any library in the state.
Yes.
And that would come to me without going through any librarian at any particular library.
Yes.
So you can do it. You can get around it.
You can get around. Not everyone knows about it. I don't know if all of you know about it, but it is one of the best kept secrets. You can get any book from any library in Michigan for free. The only bad thing is don't ever lose it, because the costs are astronomical because it's part of this bigger system. I might know that from experience, but you know what? I'm going to look that up, and I want to figure that out. That's Herrick, but and some libraries have said we're not going to be part of that larger system for this very reason. So you only get what we offer with our library card. So that's one sort of way around that. Yeah.
Actually, you can get any book that has been cataloged by the Library of Congress from anywhere in the United States. It's a rather complex, if you go beyond Michigan, it gets very complicated, but you can do that.
Oh, I didn't
Yes,
know.
that's true. And it can take some time. But when I was doing this work on Frederick Douglass, I found that there were about 50 biographies for children that had been published since 1895 for children. And it took some time, but I was able to get even the most remote, unheard of book somehow. And if all else fails, it'll come from the Library of Congress itself, maybe, but they try to find one in another library. So the system is just amazing as to what you can access.
My life just got even better. Thank you so much. You know, I thought I hit the pinnacle, you guys. When I became a professor at Hope, you can get books out for 6 months. That's so exciting, you know?
Just so you know, it's not free when I mean, Melcat is free, but if you go if you're going, through the whole country,
Yes.
it's called a super loan. In the
Oh.
library Herrick charges $5 for a super loan.
Oh, good.
In the other library may charge more.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, you can get almost anything unless it's like a reference book where they won't send it,
Okay.
but it's not free. So.
But
just
it's
so you know.
cheaper than driving all the way to
dampening
that
my
other
excitement
library
here.
that's in Boston or, Tennessee or something.
Small price to pay. Small price. Yeah. Excellent. Other questions or comments about libraries? Yes. Oh, right up here. Oh, Joyce, right here. Oh.
I'm not sure this is about a library, but I'm wondering, and I wasn't here last week, so you may have covered this, but how much are kids and teenagers reading books as opposed to getting information online?
Yeah. The stats are saddening. Although as a literacy researcher, I want to complicate them. Students today are reading less. Actually, all of us are, including seniors. We're all reading less. That's just came out of the National Endowment for the Arts. They did a national survey. All of us, regardless of income level, education background, we are all reading less print books. Now, graphic novel reading, though, is skyrocketing. So students are reading that. Audiobooks, I think, much increase. I don't know if you have grandkids who listen to audiobooks, even in my own kids when they were young compared to today, many more audiobooks are available. I am not as alarmed as some people are, because just because we're not reading a book doesn't mean we're not reading. It's a different kind of reading and we need different skills for that. But we also never had graphic novels in the same way that we do today. And kids are excited about that. And that they're still print, right? So some people are thinking, oh, print books are all, it's gone. Absolutely not. I actually think kids today still love holding print books in their hands. Some of them are reading on Kindles, that actually hasn't picked up as much as people thought they would. And librarians would know better than I do in terms of print materials being checked out. We are all overall reading less. I think it's something we have to fight for and model for our kids and each other. To read books. But yes, we are seeing a decrease. There's some new developments that are exciting to me as I think about it. For example, kids today are writing more than you all ever did. Now, what kind of writing is it? It is texting, right? It is on YouTube channels, those sorts of things. But as someone who studies writing pedagogy, students are communicating ideas through the written form much more than I did when I was younger. And that's something to celebrate. I'm not a doomsday person. I don't think the glory days were back in the 80s when I was young or in the 60s or whatever. I think that we just change as a society. And I think there's things that we give up that are lamentable. And I think there's new things always with every generation that we can celebrate. So yes, pause for concern. And also, how do we then support our students with the developing new technologies that we have? And I would argue a librarian's job today is vastly different than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You need a different skill set. You need different training, right? It's a really different kind of job. So even this concept of libraries has changed dramatically in the last few decades. Thank you for the question. It's excellent. Going back to And Tango Makes Three, this book was written, I should have written the date down. I'm forgetting right now. It's a true story. 2 male penguins, true story, in a zoo. Found an egg or had an egg. I don't know the exact whole thing with it, but it's a true story. And they made a picture book about it. And it is banned and challenged because it's 2 male penguins. Now, does that happen in nature? It does. And yet this idea of indoctrination. So I don't want a library to have this because it is encouraging or it is normalizing this kind of relationship. So wanted to highlight that. Nancy brought that up before. One of you asked about In the Heart of the Sea, switching from picture books to an adult book. I just wanted to respond to this because it's interesting to me. This book I received pushback on not because of diverse representation, but because of the lack of diverse representation. So I had people in the community say to me, how dare you pick this book? It's written by a white male author, and there are only a few African Americans in the book. And the African American sailor who is in the book gets eaten alive. Like, how can you pick that for our community? It was a fair question. I mean, I get lots of unique questions in my position, and I want to encourage people to give me their feedback. And I wanted to say, thank you for that. Yes. And we're going to do programming that is going to respond to that. And I don't think we should shy away from that. I think we should talk about it. Because what was it like back then? And how do authors make their choices? So how do you use a book with particular content to say, let's talk about that. Let's talk about right and wrong and how society has changed and all, whose perspective is this being told? But yes, so from the left, I got pushback on this book. Interestingly, this year, it'll probably be from the right with this book right here. But anyway, just keeping it interesting.
I loved the big reads In the Heart of the Sea. Having been a nuclear sailor for 6 years before coming to Hope College, I learned that in rough situations at sea, race is a non-issue.
Mhm.
Can you save each other?
Mhm.
Period.
The argument is, why weren't there more Black captains? Right? Like, why, the hierarchy, why were they given the worst jobs? Yes, to your point. And I think let's ask that question, right? Like, why were they the first ones eaten? How did this author today write about this? If he was an author of color, maybe he would have told the story differently. Let's explore that, right? So absolutely, I think this is a story of humanity. When everything is stripped away, who are we, regardless of race, gender, educational position, etc. Yes.
I think I want to return to the discussion of making good choices, whether you're a teacher or a school district or a library, because this book and almost every other book that has some controversial can make the best discussions. If there's nothing controversial in there, there's nothing to learn.
Mhm.
But I got a but that comes with this.
I love it.
We've only been in Michigan for 3 years and not even quite that. And I joined a library, not Herrick. Now I'm a member of Herrick, but I was at a different library, and I joined the book group because that's what I always do to meet people. And I could tell there was like a big reaction going on to this whole book banning things. And all they picked was books that were I hate to say the word because it's a bad word to use, but they were really woke. And there was this one book called The Boy with a Bird in His Chest. Have you ever read this book?
No. Adult, is it an adult?
It's an
fiction?
adult book discussion, though it could go both ways. And we also read a lot of, some of them were quality books that were like about trans families
Sure.
and stuff. Some of them were quality books, but some of them weren't, but they were topical
Mhm.
about this hot topic that would, like waving a red flag in somebody's face, like in the face of the bull.
Mhm.
And I hated that book so much. And the whole group and the librarian who chose it had not read it. She picked it on the basis of a review, probably in some very liberal piece of, and it's really important to pick quality,
Mhm.
then have a good discussion, regardless of what's in it,
Yes.
so that people can learn something. One other topic I just want to bring up is how the spectrum has changed. When I was when my kids were little, the first book I ever heard of being taken away was Little Black Sambo,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Remember Little Black Sambo? We all read it. It was sort of a fun book. I even think Little Black Sambo could have been used to give education
Mhm.
about what colonialism was really like
Mhm.
and why we treated people like they were subhuman. I mean, even Little Black Sambo. But today, we're picking on Laura Ingalls Wilder. There's a lot of context in a lot to learn about American history in Laura, if you just put the stuff with the lesson. Anyhow,
Mhm.
That's all I have to say.
Oh, that was fantastic. Well, first of all, welcome to Michigan. You came at a great time. I think, and to me, that is where the expertise and skill of someone who has studied literature and knows how to have a rich discussion, when you can pick a book and you can leave a book like this, for example, and say, wow, I didn't realize that there were Black captains out there. I didn't realize, like you come away and you can disagree with each other, but like how you do that, I think is really important. And I love hearing about your, just your comment about a book controversy. We shouldn't shy away from it. Let's use the book as a springboard, right? To either become, to share our beliefs with other people, to learn other people's perspective that we don't have, right? And we're losing some of that by not being able to do that. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for those examples. I'll be fair. At times I have said, who is telling us that we shouldn't read particular books? Okay. So we had, when we did Joy Harjo's book, American Sunrise, we had a leading scholar in the field, Debbie Reese, Indigenous scholar who writes and studies children and young adult literature and portrayal of Native Americans. And her argument is, I don't think there's enough worthy in Laura Ingalls Wilder's books to read them anymore. I don't have her perspective. I'm not Native American, right? It gives me pause that she, as a Native American, is saying this. She just said it's too hurtful for me and my people to read how Laura talks about Indians in the book, right? That's interesting to me. When we talked with her a little bit more in her webinar, she said, by pairing it with this book, have them have conversation with each other. And I think that's what you're getting at, right? And so to even have pause to say, Little Black Sambo, we could use that. And you know what, though, if my trusted and vetted and African-American friends are saying, you know what, that book, there are better books to do that, right? So sometimes I'll say, yes, that's not my perspective. I need to learn from a perspective that is different than my own. And sometimes we can have some really rich pairings with books that show very different perspectives, but then the skill is in the discussion, right? And how that's fostered. And you need trust in order for that to happen. Without alienating, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So yes. Okay. Next question. Here we go. Where is book banning happening? Some of you we talked about that briefly, but I wanted to go back to it. I just said a sassy everywhere, which isn't totally true. The states that tend to vote more Republican, they are having more booked bans than others. And we'll see that a reason for that in just a minute. It does tend to happen more often in conservative states and towns. There's a reason that Hudsonville, for example, and Allendale in our area, their school districts have more conversations about book banning. Zealand as well. I'm not hearing it out of Holland or West Ottawa as much. Okay, if you just sort of look at sort of voting representation, those sorts of things. It tends to happen in the context of library and school. Why is it happening not as much here in the city of Holland? I think you could argue Herrick has trust in the community, has history in the community, has strong leadership and clear processes about how to do that. So that sometimes when there's book banning and challenges, some school districts haven't prepared themselves well for it. And so they haven't been proactive, and then something comes up and then you get a big, YouTube trend on your hands. Last night I spent way too much time watching YouTube clips of school boards meetings gone awry. I lost an hour of my life, but it was very entertaining. Just people, anyway. So book banning, I think someone asked, is this just sort of a trend right now? Book banning has been around since books first got made. So this is not a new topic, and it's not a topic that's going away. However, I will say we are in a cultural moment. Okay. Back in the day when the great Gilly Hopkins was challenged and banned, we were doing it for reasons of coarse language. Okay. She says, damn it. Okay. That's a different cultural moment, right? Than where we are today with GLBTQ issues, particularly. I have a slide coming up that will just show that a little bit more, but we'll get to that in just a minute. A number of you asked questions about what role does government play? Gosh, it's complex. And there's different ways. So here we go. Libraries and schools are the primary places where books are banned. Okay, so if you think about that, and if you think about wanting to get more involved or be active, get to know your school board members in your local school district and get to know your library school board and librarians. Okay, that's the sort of nexus. When we step beyond that, because libraries and school boards make the decisions, but states can pass legislation that affects schools. So for example, 44 states, that was a number much higher than I realized. And this is just one particular topic, but have introduced bills that would restrict teaching of critical race theory. Okay. And Linda, I know you're going to jump in on this because we talked about the difference between sort of not wanting ideas to be perpetuated or to be taught or studied and books, right? And sometimes there's a difference between the two, but oftentimes these are connected. If you look here, this is really small print. I don't expect you to look at it, but in Iowa, for example, in 2001, the Republican governor signed a law limiting the ways teachers can discuss race and gender. Okay. Why do I bring that up? When there is a state mandate or state bill that is passed about this, then there's implications on school boards and schools for the curriculum, the books in their curriculum, because someone could say, hey, here's the state bill that has just passed. Your book talks about race and gender that's antithetical to this overall thing. In Florida, for example, Governor DeSantis in 2022 Stop Woke Act. It prohibits lessons or trainings that teach that individuals are inherently racist or sexist because of their race or sex. It's a bit fuzzy, right? So does a book like Ghost Boys, is that making people, white people, feel bad about themselves, right? On first glance, you could say, yes, the main character is a Black boy who was shot by a police. So this book could be banned, right? Just under that, although you could also argue, because the other protagonist in the story is the daughter of a white police officer who's the one who shot this Black boy. So this book, and I was talking to Nancy about it, I think this book is brilliant in that it's not a one-sided thing. You have the daughter of a white police officer become friends with the ghost of the Black boy who'd been shot and killed. It messes it up, right? And yet, on sort of just quick overview, you could say this book needs to be banned in Florida or for whatever other states. So there's an increase in bills that are being introduced on the state level, and then more states have passed things about critical race theory or gender or so on. Yes, Susan.
One quick comment.
Yeah, please.
I brought an article today about what happened in Florida when DeSantis passed that, so that you cannot include certain things in high school psychology classes. As a result, the College Board has now eliminated credit in Florida for AP classes because they're not allowed to give a college level approach to psychology. And so I'll pass this around and you can see how things can backfire on states that get a little out, get ahead of themselves, like these laws that try to ban a whole type of curriculum.
Yes.
And then they find out that now their high school students can't get college credit because the school is either violating state law or the College Board requirements in order to offer this class.
Right.
So pass that around.
Yeah. And go ahead.
My understanding, going back to the critical race theory
Oh, sure. Yeah.
thing, is that critical race theory is actually only taught at the college and beyond level. So what are they talking about?
I know it's tricky. I only studied it in my PhD program, and I barely understood it. It was dense, you guys. It's dense philosophical argument. How it has been used in mainstream, which is how they're using it here, is different. It's not truly what critical race theory is. But the way it's been mobilized, that term has been mobilized, generally means, how are you teaching history? And are you teaching history in a way that makes white people feel bad? That's sort of dumbed down, and it's not right, because true critical race theory, I mean, you guys, I couldn't understand it in my PhD program, and so if we think that kindergartners are getting this, it's simply not true, right? Because of what it truly is. Here are states that have some of the blue ones have been signed, the red ones have been vetoed or overturned. And so just so you know that there are things happening. I loved the question last week too. What is the role of government in this? And so state government, so emailing your state legislators, just to even have them know sort of what you think about this is just helpful, can be helpful feedback as well. Interesting enough, Illinois did the opposite. They just passed, and I'm curious to see, this just happened in June of this year. To fight book bans, Illinois passed a ban on book bans. It gets funny. A ban on book bans, right? And so here we're going to see the divide once again, right? Between states, how they vote politically. This would never get passed in Texas or Florida, right? For example, but in Illinois, libraries and schools are not allowed to ban books. So it depends what state you live in now, right? And how this is gonna play. In New Jersey, there is a similar bill that is being introduced. So those are the two that I'm sort of keeping my eye on as we think about that. Another question was local county commissioners, those sorts of things. Here in Michigan, I love how we make national news, you guys. But here in Michigan, Cass County, and I'm not exactly sure in Michigan where Cass County is, but somewhere in our beautiful big state, was poised to consider a book ordinance that could put librarians in legal jeopardy. Our sweet librarians, you guys, having to go to court. Anyway, this is an example. They were going to charge librarians because if they had books, criminalize the distribution of sexually explicit library books to children. It didn't go through, but I wanted to share that with you as a case of local government, someone saying, I want a book ordinance, and if this passes on our county level, then librarians could get charged, okay, by distributing books or having books available. Another one, a Michigan County prosecutor is thinking about criminal charges over a controversial book, genderqueer memoir. And so this is happening, a county prosecutor on the county level about book ordinances. So it's happening on different levels as well, not just in libraries and schools. Those are the sort of centers, but then as we sort of pull back from that. One of you asked specifically, hey, what exactly is grooming? And the definition of grooming is desensitization to sexual topics and to make the behavior seem natural. And so that is a term that gets thrown around when we see books like Tango Makes Three, Babies Everywhere. It's this idea that at a young age, these books are indoctrinating kids and making it seem normal. It's grooming them. So as they grow up, then they are going to think that it is okay or no. So, right. So who gets to decide moral and ethical lines, those sorts of things. But here's the book Pride. This book opens up conversations that lead to grooming and does not separate education from moral beliefs. An Idaho woman wrote. A Pennsylvania woman, Julian, is a mermaid. Featuring a boy who dressed up as a mermaid will confuse a child to use drag clothing and makeup. Okay, so I just wanted to respond specifically to that claim. Some of you said, what exactly are books being banned about? But these are some of the reasons and some of the rationales for that. We shared this last week, but and some of these overlap with each other. So grooming, for example, often fits as well with LGBTQ or with sexual content. Critical race theories mentioned here. Indoctrination, you could argue, also fits in with books that are seen as, you could say, sexual or graphic or racist, those sorts of things. So some of these Washington Post survey things aren't that helpful to me, but it does show an inappropriate. What does inappropriate mean? At what level, et cetera. But these are the top 10 reasons cited. So this is with picture books. So if you're wondering why people ban it, these are some of the reasons. Well, it is indoctrination, or it is anti-police, or it is inappropriate to the age level. Oops. As a side note, just on the grooming topic, middle grade books, which we talked about, that's sort of our general focus this time, is for 8 to 12, lighter content than young adult novels. It's actually, they are addressing more real topics of sexual harassment and experiences with kids. We're talking, this is representation, right? Stories involving consent and violence are important for some preteens to read, writers say, but a sensitive approach and a light touch are key. And so it is sort of heartening for me to hear that there are authors who are saying, no, you know what? There are kids who get raped. There are kids who go through terrible home situations. And I want to write a book for them. And I want to be sensitive about it. It does not need to be overly graphic, right? So thinking very intentionally about an age level, a sensitive topic, right? And Linda, these are all the things that you thought about when you wrote your books. Maybe not everyone agrees with sort of where those lines get drawn, but I've not read any of these 3 books. This just came out more recently, but when it is done in a in a very a literary and a sensitive and intentional way, I think these are topics that our kids can handle and need to know about as they think about who is in this world and what happens. Once again, I just wanted to, I said I would come back to this. What are the processes people need? What are the processes people need to do in order for a book to be challenged? So a form needs to be filled out. I want to highlight this though, because the Hudsonville Public School, it's a big form. Please look at it at the end of the session. And the idea is that then there's a book review committee, teacher, librarian, administrator. It's very thoughtfully put together and they vote. So a parent fills this out. It goes to this committee of people chosen, and then they make a decision about the book. Okay. The book review committee with Jarhead 7-0 said, no, thank you for this completed form, but we're going to keep the book in the library. Okay. The parent did not like it, that response. And in the process, the next step is to go to the school board. So 7-0. So the committee was unanimous to say, Jarhead should be in our library. It's not for everyone to read, but it should be available. They went to the school board. The school board voted against it 4-3. So it was complicated. Part of me, I'm not on the school board at Hudsonville Public, but part of me just said, you've hired people who have expertise. When it's a 7-0 and you go against that, and it was a close vote to be sure, but it's interesting, right? They superseded and decided to take the book away with just sort of a 1 vote difference. Yeah.
Did they throw this person who filed any crumbs? I keep thinking there's got to be a way to keep these people on the team by
Sure.
saying, we will control access to this book.
Yes.
So that if the child wants to check it out, somebody's informed or that's put behind the desk. I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I just wonder if there's some way to conciliate people without taking
Yes.
the book away.
Ooh, see, this is what I'm talking about, you guys, right? And some libraries have, I don't know if that was an offer at Hudsonville, but some school libraries have said, you know what, we're going to have a restricted area in the library, right? To just sort of flag that. And that could be one of those crumbs you're talking about, right? To say to parents, thank you. And we understand that you're uncomfortable with mention of suicide or how the Army, it's a kind of a negative portrayal of the Army. But it's someone's experience in it. And maybe our Army can handle having different perspectives about it, right? But sometimes libraries have said, hey, in order to check this out, you need a parent to sign. I'm not sure what they did, but those are ways to say, hey, we hear you. I think this group of parents wanted it away for everyone. So it could be like it was either this or nothing. Okay. So that's some of the reason for that. Yes. Oh.
I think it's much better than the state of Illinois making a blanket statement like that, because this is involving us in the community.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I think it's important to say, concerned parents, it's not a bad thing. I want parents to be involved in schools, right? I think schools run better when parents show up for parent-teacher conferences, right? When parents care enough. I think what worries me sometimes is parents who say it's either my way or the highway and I want to decide for everyone. But you're right, Illinois, sort of that process. It'd be interesting to see what happens long term. Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that, because a number of you in your note cards last week said, why do decisions need to be made based on what just a few people want, right? I think that was a great question. Why are we changing so much based on a few people? Some of it, you guys, is loud voices, right? And loud voices are often the ones who are complaining. If parents are happy with how things are, usually you don't show up. You don't really need to. You're sort of okay with the status quo, right? And so maybe this is a prompt for more people to say, hey, I appreciate that the school chose this book, and I'm going to let the superintendent know, or I'm going to just say thank you for that. Superintendents and administrators and school boards keep track of how many people write in. So I always tell people, if you have an opinion about something, let someone know. Good, bad, or, just to do that. Some school boards, quite frankly, you guys, I mean, it's a tinderbox right now. Some of them, it's like not worth the fight. So yes, it's a few people, but they don't want it to get out of hand. Maybe a library is having a millage coming up, right? They're just sort of like, we got to get through this. We're going to lay low. One of my libraries, not to be named, in our big read area said, hey, we'd love to do a book banning event, but we're not going to. We're up for a millage soon. And I don't want to ruffle feathers. I respect that, right? Maybe and then we can think of a creative way to have an event somewhere else, right? Or whatever, but the publicity and media coverage.
That's like Scholastic Publishing, trying not to offend anybody. We want to stay in the middle. We don't want to do anything that might raise certain people
Yes.
to bother us a lot. You know, it doesn't represent what the public might really elect if they knew what was going on. And, you know, school board members are elected, are they not?
Yes.
Okay, so who runs for school board? Then that's the question. Who are we electing for school board?
Yes.
And do they want a don't make any waves approach,
Sure.
or do they want
Yes.
the other approach?
And then a little bit further, how many of us vote for school board?
Yeah.
We got to show up and vote, right? Anyway, so you're going to say something else then.
It's also interesting that both the county commissioners and the school board sometimes think that they are in charge of what's in the library,
Yes.
in the public library.
Mhm.
Well, the school board isn't in charge of the public library.
Right.
But as you said, the idea that everybody can just go to the public library, only if your parent has the car and the time and the
Exactly.
ability to take you to the public library and the knowledge to do that. The only people that you're hurting then really are the less advantaged children. The
Mhm.
more advantaged children will have parents who can help them get access when they're denied. But you're only denying those who have less.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yes.
Last week you mentioned Mothers of Liberty or Mothers
Yeah.
for
Moms for
Liberty.
Liberty. Yes.
Are they active in this area? Because I was at the county commissioners meeting this week and there were several women with their T-shirts on.
Oh, Moms for Liberty.
Yeah, they both spoke. They didn't speak to the issue of books,
Okay.
but it was curious to me that they were advertising at the commission meeting.
First of all, thank you for showing up to that meeting. Yes, more of us need to do that, right? And I know their platform is larger than just banning books. So my guess is there's other issues as well. But yes, there is a presence here in Ottawa County. Absolutely.
And have you heard from Moms for Liberty?
They have not contacted me directly, but I would love to be in a conversation with them. I say that now. I want to once again to just highlight why do decisions on what a few people want in the English curriculum for regardless of grade level. You don't ever teach a book. You use a book to teach something larger, right? In that way, there is no perfect book for whatever skills, right? And so sometimes as a teacher, I might love Ghost Boys. I do. But maybe given my students, given the climate, given everything, maybe there's another book that I can use that gets at these topics and gets at the skills that I want my students to have in a slightly different way, right? So what am I gaining and what am I losing if I choose a really controversial book? So I just want to highlight that because sometimes I think the idea is that the curriculum are the books. Books are only used to help students develop reading comprehension, writing, perspective taking, etc. And I don't think there's ever one perfect book. Now, is it worth dying on a hill, fighting for some books to remain in the curriculum? Perhaps. But I also think there's so many books out there that sometimes we could choose different books that perhaps lead to different outcomes. Now, Linda's comment, is that taking the middle way and selling yourself out? Maybe, but I actually like to think of it as it's a larger picture and context. And my job is to help my students meet standards, not to expose them to a particular book, if that makes sense. I have a lot of power though, as a teacher and a professor. Power is maybe not the right word, but if I give a book recommendation to a student who trusts me, they're probably going to read the book. Right. And so in that way, there are so many ways that teachers can still encourage students to read controversial books, maybe not through the, sort of mandated curriculum, because I think there's other arguments we can make about that. Speaking of which, how do teachers respond? Lots of different responses. Okay. I think it's wrong to think that all teachers are against banned books. I think some teachers participate in saying this is not appropriate for our library, or because all teachers are across the political spectrum, right? So I just want to name that as a reality. Some teachers fly under the radar. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to elevate sort of who I am in the district. Some of them will have controversial books in their classroom libraries. So they'll have bookshelves, high school, even middle school, elementary school, and some of those books in their classroom libraries will be sort of controversial that they individually recommend to students. So that's how some teachers have gotten around it. Some of them have just said, hey, I'm not doing a whole class book. I am going to let students choose, and that then allows students to gravitate to different kinds of books. If a book has too much sexual content and will trigger someone, perhaps reading homegoing is not for them, but here's another book that also gets at these topics, but in a really different way. Okay, so some teachers are just saying, I'm changing my pedagogical approach. We're not doing whole class, we're doing book groups, as I talked about a little bit earlier. Many teachers also have talked about frustration and burnout. Like, I am scared for my job. I'm not tenured. And this really, when I think about brand new teachers versus teachers who've been in a district for a long time and who have the community's respect and administrators' respect, that's really different than getting a first-year teacher out on the chopping block for choosing a particular book. So more, as we said last week, more teachers are indeed sort of self-censoring and saying, I don't want to make a big stink. I want to keep my job. Some of them are saying, I'm going to wait till I'm tenured or whatever. So different responses to that. But that's why, once again, as we talked about what you all can do, support teachers to just acknowledge and affirm, like, wow, this political climate is crazy. And I'm grateful for the work you're doing, right? And to libraries and library boards as well. Let's go to the next one. Here are just two examples. A ninth grade teacher said the environment has changed her teaching, not just her book selection, but her teaching. She hesitates to tackle topics like racism and socioeconomic or LGBTQ issues in her classroom for fear of being targeted by conservative parents. This is what, Linda, we're getting at too, with this ideas. And if it's changing our teaching, how are we going to learn how to disagree with each other in society if we're not practicing it in our schools? Because teachers are afraid of, like, this is going to get on the topic of police brutality. I don't want to even enter it, so let's not even talk about it, right? Where, when, how do we have these conversations? And there's no easy answer. And I don't have the answer, but I worry about it. I worry about it at Hope College, because professors even will say, I don't want to get into that. And students don't know how to argue with each other. And so let's just gloss over it. So anyway, so avoiding topics. Some people are saying it's teaching. Here's another, it says, a lot of my job is trying to figure out what is okay. Not being able to speak to the things that I think are really important, not being able to express myself is a little bit frustrating at times when it seems like everyone else is having no trouble expressing themselves louder and louder. So teachers, you guys, it's a unique spot, and it's not just English teachers, it's history teachers. How do I teach history? And with the elections coming up, how do I teach civics in a way, right? And if we think about as we think about the state of democracy, we need those civics classes all the more, right? And yet if teachers are on pins and needles, how do we help them and support them in that? Yeah.
I just have a question. Isn't it a lot harder for a teacher, like an English teacher, if they're giving a whole bunch of different books? Isn't it harder to teach? Because when I was a kid, you picked one book and you spent all the time talking about that one book.
Yeah.
So how do you do it if everyone's reading a different book? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So you do more with like focus groups. So you meet with a small group of students and talk about the book. So there's more independent reading on students' part, and there's less sort of, here's a quiz on chapter 2, because you can't do that if you have 5 different groups, right? And so the whole approach is different, but research in the field has shown that that actually increases reading comprehension because students are more motivated. It deepens their overall fostering of love of reading. So it's a big topic right now. Like, how do we do it? And we just have to simply do it differently than what it was before, which was much more like, here's a quiz on chapter 2. Or at the, here are vocab words from chapter 1. So it's taught differently in that regard, but it's so much better for differentiation, even in terms of reading levels. So you have some kids in 9th grade are reading at a 4th grade reading level. So you're able then to recommend a book that they can read that is actually at their reading level instead of them fake reading, which many teenagers do.
That was kind of where my question was going is, do students of different reading levels self-select books that are easier?
Yes, but a lot of teenagers, we'll talk about this in the next session, hide it. You don't know that they're struggling with reading because they're really good at faking it. And so some of that's the trickiest to even figure out what reading level students are at. But yes, and some of them will do audiobooks or whatever, but the key is trying to figure out where exactly is your reading at. And you have kids in 9th grade reading at college level, down, as I said, to 4th grade. And as an English teacher, I never thought about that. I just thought about teaching books because I love books, and realizing like, I actually have to teach reading. Like, what does that mean to comprehend and to understand vocabulary and those sorts of things? So yeah, some of it's self-selecting, some of it is like, I want to not be embarrassed in front of my peers, so I'm going to fake it. Yeah. So on. We promised that we would talk about how to address parent concerns. How do we think about these things that are mentioned in books? A question I have that I think can be helpful is, just because you read something, does it mean you're going to agree with it? Okay, like just because we're seeing things that maybe are different than what you would believe, or just because you read it, does it make you agree with it? It's a place to start, right? I mean, that's some of the indoctrination. If my kid reads it, therefore my kid is going to wholesale believe this. Okay, I think that's just a first place to start. Just because you read something, and then should we be talking about critical, thinking and responding and things like that? Okay, another question. If you read it, is it going to make you change your worldview? Just because you read something, does that mean you are going to have a different belief, faith-wise or otherwise, just because of that, right? And I think these are questions that we can argue aren't true. Just because it's there, what's the purpose of it? If you read it, will it desensitize you or corrupt you? Right? This is some of the argument as well, right? We want to avoid, and I think it's a complicated response to that. But just because it's there, just because you read it, does that mean homegoing, for example? Let's talk about this book. There's some graphic sex rape scene in here. Now, if we read it, is that going to make us more desensitized to this topic? My reaction, it makes me feel all the more like it's lamentable, and it increases my sadness for it because it's written in a way that doesn't glorify it or romanticize it, right? It's how it is written about. It is how it is portrayed. And I think sometimes reading things, and I'm not going to say some of it does glorify it and some of it does romanticize it. So please be clear to hear me say that. But sometimes I think, and let's just use a more lighthearted example. Great Gilly Hopkins, right? She says, damn it. She says, God, okay, in that kind of tone. Does that make me want to start swearing? Actually, it doesn't, because when you read the whole book, here is a kid who is hurting. Her mother has abandoned her. She's in the foster care system. She gets placed with a quirky woman who shows her unconditional love, and she does not know what to do with it. And so she fights it every step of the way. She steals from this woman. She's rude to this woman. She pushes this woman away. And what does this woman do in response? Loves her all the more. Oh, I'm going to start crying. It is beautiful. And you see the progression as the book goes on. Where does the swearing take place? It's not at the end, right? Where Gilly, for the first time, understands what love is and is able to start showing love because she's never had it and she's guarded herself, right? Yes, there's swearing in the book. Do I want my kids to swear? Absolutely not. But I also want them to know, right? Like that is part of the portrayal of Gilly that we have to get through in order to be in tears at the end, right? When the story ends. And so when we pull things out without knowing their larger context, right? We don't see how they're portrayed. And the point is not to glorify Gilly. No, it's to say how wounded Gilly is. Often the kids who are showing us the worst behaviors in schools, where is that behavior coming from and why, right? Not responding to the behavior, understanding different. The Giver, Lois Lowry. There's a scene in here. If we had more time, I was going to read it aloud to you. There's a scene in here that talks about euthanasia. A baby dies. Jonas is the main character, his dad. He watches his dad give this baby a needle and the baby dies. That's a terrible scene. I am not promoting that in society whatsoever. But the point of this scene in the book is to break Jonas's heart, to say, this is not right. We can't live like that. I've got to break free as the giver and go to a different kind of society, right? The whole point of it is to show how cold and how void of love and empathy that we have. So once again, if you pull it out, right, it looks terrible. Why on earth would you want to read a scene about a baby who dies? The larger context, right, is Lois Lowry is trying to paint us a picture that when we are thinking these sorts of things, and when it comes to fruition, those kinds of things could happen because we don't value human life, those sorts of things. So I wanted to highlight that. Let's get on to, here we go, New Kid. There we go. I just wanted to highlight, because New Kid has been banned and challenged, not yet in our community, we'll see. But some of you said, why? Okay, now graphic novel for some of you is brand new. You read the pictures, the images, just as much as the text. So now when many of you perhaps will read this book, you're going to read it really quickly. Graphic novel experts take 3 times as longer to read a graphic novel than those of us who are accustomed to print. And why is that? Because they have learned to read the images in a much more sophisticated way than any of us. It's like, it's brilliant. I mean, oftentimes we use this as like a hook for reluctant readers. So boys who are maybe struggling will be like, oh, just give them a graphic novel. And then it's a gateway drug to the real books. Actually, these are real books. They're just told in a really different way. We have things, these are called panels. The white thing is gutters. I mean, I could go on for 3 hours about how to read graphic novels, but the way the images are shown on the page, so for example, this page right here has no panels or gutters. It's a 1-page panel, very intentionally chosen to further characterization or plot development or whatever. I never thought about that when I first read through it. I was just reading the words on the page, but to learn how to read the images. Anyway, all that to say, why is this book being challenged or banned? We have an example here. These are 2 examples that get pulled out under the frame of microaggressions. And this book, the argument is this book is designed to make white people feel bad. Okay, why? Let's start with this one. Oh my gosh, your hair is so cool. I have to touch it. And our main character says, actually, you don't. But I can't help it. And then you need to try harder. Okay, so he's a new kid. He's one of the few Black kids at a private school. He's meeting lots of people. Here is one encounter that he has. Okay, here's another one. The teacher says, are there any other questions? Especially, she's trying to be sensitive, especially from you new students. Deandra, Jordan, Alexandra. And he goes, my name is Drew. Oh, I'm sorry, Drew. Deandra is one of my former students. He was a real handful. Right? You don't know many Black people? You use the same name for all of them because they all look the same. They all act the same, right? Like that's sort of, this is what we're talking about with microaggressions, right? And it's okay to touch the hair of a Black kid because it's different than mine. Like these sorts of things. Now, you pull these out. It's interesting, right? But it's in you got to read the whole book to understand it's in this larger context of the point is not new Black kid. The point of the book is new kid. He's a kid like all of us have felt when we're new in a situation. He's unsure. He's trying to make friends. And as a new Black kid in a predominantly white school, he has some unique experiences. You guys, I think it's really helpful for other people to learn about experiences that were different perhaps than your own, and or Jared Kraft has said he's had lots of kids say to him, you named some of what I've experienced, and I have not read that in a book yet. Representation, right? Saying this, my story is not just my story, it's the story of other people as well. When we pull out this though, right, we don't get that larger context. And he's not here saying, white people, you should feel bad. No, he's saying, I was a new kid. It was hard for me. I was insecure. I didn't know where I fit. I didn't know who I belonged to. And I wanted to tell that story, right? But once again, we need to see that larger story. I think I might just end there. Oh, we only have 10 minutes left, you guys. Here's the really quick thing. The Fight Over Mouse. This is the book, the graphic novel, Pulitzer Prize, 1996 that we talked about before. But they wanted to ban mouse. because of the rejection or of disregard for Holocaust education. It portrays Jews as mice and Nazis as cats. So it's a really interesting story, but there's inappropriate words, including bitch and goddamn, and an image of a partially nude woman. It takes place in World War II. There's concentration camps, right? Like the language was appropriate for the context. Once again, when you pull it out, you're like, yeah, that sounds not good. And yet when you put it within this larger context of story, I think we can't take things out of context of this larger purpose. And I do want to just go back really quick. Read banned books. We talked about this last week in their entirety. Don't just read excerpts. Remember the literary purposes. You can disagree with an author's choices and still read the book and still have a great conversation about it. I think we should have it at that level. If I was the author of this book, would I have included this particular scene? Maybe not. Maybe I think that the point could have been made without it. Okay, clearly the author disagreed with that, but let's talk about it on that level rather than just saying that the author was trying to indoctrinate people. So let's have this larger conversation about it. The context where it's read, support your local libraries, your local schools and teachers. And I'm going to end there because we only have like 7 minutes left and I'd love to hear more comments and Linda jump in for whatever. Yes, right over here, Joyce.
A funny story about my self-censoring myself. I got a book from my parents called Facts of Life and Love for Teenagers, 8th grade. I was very interested. I did not want my parents see me reading it. They had given it to me.
That is a great story. Yes, thank you.
You made a comment. If you read it, will it change your worldview? Worldview must expand with education, and reading is education.
Ooh, that's a whole layer right here, right? Will it change your core beliefs? Will it change the way you think about the world? My kids are white and they grew up in a small town named Holland, Michigan. They read The Hate You Give, which is inner city Black girl and her experiences. Their worldview, I would argue, was deepened because they learned of an experience that they did not personally have. Now, does it change their big structure of belief of God? I would argue their belief in God deepened in lamenting the brokenness of the world. And that book was a gift in that regard. So as you talk about enriching, thank you for that. It's a great comment. Oh.
To the people who are looking at banned books, are they also looking at what their children are reading on the internet and are seeing in videos and watching on a TV program that's played during the day, or with streaming, they can play it any time they want to? I'm wondering if these same people are monitoring the other forms of stimulus that are coming into their children's mindset.
That is a gap in what I talked about today, and I apologize, you named it. Paul, thank you. We are seeing a noticeable gap between parents who are so focused on books and not realizing what their kids can access at any time, probably without their knowledge on the internet, social media, et cetera, right? And the concern here, why is that not being channeled, right, to social media platforms and decision makers? And excellent, that is a gap. You identified it 100%. We're not seeing the same sort of mobilizing around social media content and what students can access. Did I respond well to that? Yeah.
Many years ago, we had a graphic novel in the YA department at Herrick, and it was a World War II story about a teenager in Poland. It was not Moss, it was something else. And we had a challenge to that book. There was one panel it was a 3-volume set. There was one panel in it where there was a scene of Nazi soldiers rousting out people in an apartment building. And this was in the hallway. And the one panel had a Nazi soldier with a gun in one hand. His other hand was on the breast of a woman. And so it was challenged for that one panel regardless of all the violence and everything else going on in the book. So we discussed it. I discussed it with the director, and we decided to put it in the adult collection. So we removed it from the YA, and that was satisfactory to the parent at that time. So you can move things around that way.
Yes, yes, excellent. Yeah, and as a way to sort of say, we hear this, we're not changing it in terms of owning the book and having the book available, but we are going to put in a different section. Thank you for that.
This kind of goes along with the gentleman's comment about parenting and what your kids are doing. I have a friend who is an administrator for a high school on the other side of the state. And she told me this story this couple of weeks ago. There was a young man in the school who had been caught third time vaping in the school bathroom. And the third time at that school is suspension for a couple of weeks from school. So the mother came in with the boy, and she insisted that they have a meeting with the principal and with the superintendent to talk about this, because she didn't see any reason why he should be vaped or why he should be kicked out for vaping. In the discussion, the boy kept saying, "Mom, you know I don't vape. Mom, you know I don't vape." And she says, "I know he doesn't vape. I know he doesn't vape." This was part of it, so he shouldn't be punished. Finally, they sent the boy back to class. They said, "Well, you know, you have to take it to the school board. You're going to have to take it to the school board because this is in the bylaws of the school." And so they sent the boy back to class. The mom stayed in the classroom, and the mom turned to the administrators and she said, "I know my son is lying. He does vape." And they looked at her and they said, why would you say that he doesn't vape? Well, we're going on vacation and I don't want him mad at me. So you're learning that? Kids are learning that?
Mm-hmm. It's hard being a parent of teenagers. I'm just going to throw myself under the bus. Get it wrong so many times. Yeah, I mean, that is a curious response. Yes, yes. Yeah.
Just a quick thing. I just learned what a graphic novel was. When you talked about it, I thought it was highly descriptive.
Oh,
And then you're showing these like cartoon type things and like, okay.
oh, that's on me. I'm so sorry. Yes. Although I think I said this before, the first graphic novel I read was indeed very graphic. It was Blankets by Craig Thompson, and it's an amazing book, but it is very graphic. So I just thought graphic novels as well was because it had graphic content in it, but no. Maybe I should put that on our Big Read website, just in case people are worried about.
You have one more comment?
One more. 40 years ago, medical school taught me patients are my best teachers. What do you know about readers teaching authors?
Ooh. I think any author that we've had come, and we're having Jesse and Jerry Kraft come to Holland. I think they always say that readers will pick up things in their books that they didn't even realize or appreciate. And so they have, over the 10 years, have said that they so appreciate hearing reader reaction and readers' questions to that. So I think very much informs their future books and informs their own sort of thinking about their own books that they've read. Yeah.
I read The New Kid. One of the most poignant sections where it's only about 4 pages when and they were giving gifts.
Yeah.
And the different perspective and filter is the one child was being sensitive to the lead character on giving there was a gift to KFC, there was Oreo and cookies, and there was also the third one was the gift was the Black Santa Claus. And from her perspective, a white female, she was being sensitive because he loved chocolate. He thought everyone liked a Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I forget what the first one was. Yeah. Anyway, and the basketball cookie.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he loved basketball. From her perspective, she was thinking of him, not everyone else in the class, thinking of what he liked and said it like that. But from other people's perspective, it might be you are being discriminatory, you're being stereotypic.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the issues in our current society is how the person is delivering a message, a gift, whatever it is, a stimulus to someone else, how my intent
Yes,
versus how it's perceived.
yes,
And I think that's one of the issues we have in our society of those
yes.
conflicts of the other person is not, anyway.
Because we're not even taking the time to have that conversation. 100%. Yes, absolutely. Our time is up. Last comment.
One more.
Just want to mention, I'm a member of a group that has a part of the group called Observer Corps. It's actually the League of Women Voters of the Hound area. And we send people to meetings and they write reports. It's not the advocacy part of the group, just write reports because there's not as much local coverage and reporters as there used to be. So if an Observer Corps member was interested, what would be like the meetings or boards you think would be the priority? Because without things going on in Ottawa County now, there's a lot of meetings in a lot of places and we can't go to everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's a small group, but would there be a place you'd like us to go and see reports of what happens? Like you said, you took an hour of your life that you don't have for a school board meeting. We're people who take hours and enjoy this stuff. So if you, I don't know if there's a priority board or library or something, would you have one in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I just would say Allendale right now seems to be one of the most charged, as well as Hudsonville, though maybe that sort of has calmed down a little bit. Zealand on their school board in May had banned books on their agenda. And there was some, feedback about that, but I know Zealand as a school board is sort of covering that large scale. I haven't heard from the other schools as well. Hamilton, a couple years ago with SEL curriculum, social emotional learning, they had some heated school board conversations. So in some ways, by paying attention to what's on the agenda, I would recommend sort of just seeing what's, and I don't have anything on my radar for the fall, but sometimes it comes up based on what's happening in the school. But I think any of the districts, Allendale, Hudsonville, Zealand, and maybe Hamilton, depending on what's coming up, would be the ones that would have the most sort of heated conversations about that. Thank you.
Thank you. How about a thank you for our presenters?
We are really looking forward to, we really appreciate the level of knowledge and the level of the questions and the level of response in this class that has come forward. So we're really looking forward to even more dimensions of this pursued in the next series of classes that we offer through HASP in the fall. We're going to go one more round.
Thank you.